Welcome to Undead File, where we bring you spine-chilling tales from the darkest corners of Halloween horror stories. If you are enjoying the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Now, let's dive into today's eerie story. It was the kind of Halloween party that felt both familiar and oddly off from the start. The lights flickered in that dim orange glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the walls. The house was filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft hum of a playlist that should have been fun, but instead carried an air of tension I couldn't shake. I had planned this night for weeks, hoping to forget about everything: the stress from work, the broken relationship, the nagging emptiness I couldn't quite place. I'd invited friends who I thought knew me, people who would help me forget for one night. Yet, something about the party felt wrong from the moment I stepped inside. At first, it was just the sense that I wasn't the only one aware of the odd, unspoken heaviness in the air. I pushed it aside, chalking it up to my nerves. It had been a while since I'd thrown a gathering, and perhaps I was just overthinking things. Still, there was something about the way people moved, the way they laughed too loudly, the way their eyes lingered a bit too long on empty spaces, that unsettled me. I was midway through a conversation with Zoe when I first saw him. A figure standing just beyond the dim lights near the hallway, someone I hadn't seen before. He was too still, too quiet, like a shadow glued to the corner. His costume was nothing special, a simple black cloak, a pale face obscured by dark makeup, but his eyes sent a ripple through my chest. They were too intense, too watchful, like he knew something I didn't. I felt a cold tremor race up my spine, the kind that freezes the blood and makes your heart skip a beat. "Who's that?" I whispered to Zoe, trying to sound casual. She glanced over her shoulder, then back to me. "Who?" "The guy in the corner," I said, nodding toward him. She squinted. "I don't know. I think it's one of Mark's friends, maybe." I wasn't convinced. I had seen every face at the party at least once, and this stranger didn't fit in. It wasn't just his appearance. There was something about the way he moved, too. It was subtle, but I could see him inching closer to the walls, blending into the shadows like he was trying to avoid being noticed. But somehow, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching me, watching everyone. I tried to shrug it off, but the unease settled deeper into my chest as the night wore on. The music, once carefree, now seemed to echo oddly in my head. The conversations around me became muffled, like I was underwater. My focus kept drifting back to the stranger. No one else seemed to notice him, and that made it worse. The other guests laughed, danced, and drank as though everything was fine, but I couldn't look away from the dark corner. I excused myself from Zoe and made my way to the kitchen, hoping the unfamiliar face would disappear. But when I walked back through the living room, the stranger was no longer in the corner. He was standing near the door, watching me. I froze. His gaze locked with mine, and my stomach twisted in an uncomfortable knot. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He didn't smile. His face was an expressionless mask, like he was waiting for something. But what? I couldn't tear my eyes away, feeling the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. I had to say something, but my voice felt trapped in my throat. So I did the only thing I could think of. I turned and hurried upstairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. Upstairs in the quiet of the bathroom, I tried to calm my breath. My reflection in the mirror looked as pale as I felt. I was being ridiculous, I told myself. It's just a Halloween party. He's probably just some guy trying to get attention, but the fear that crawled under my skin wouldn't go away. Something about the way he stood there, unmoving, was off. Then I heard the creak of a floorboard downstairs. I froze, my blood running cold. It wasn't the sound of someone walking. It was deliberate, the kind of noise you make when you want to be heard, when you want to announce your presence. And that's when the doorbell rang. I jumped. The sound was far too sharp, far too sudden for the calm I was trying to restore. But before I could process it, I heard someone downstairs, someone who wasn't part of the party. A deep, guttural voice murmured something I couldn't make out. It was followed by a rustling, then an uncomfortable silence. I leaned over the railing, heart hammering in my chest. The living room below was quiet. The only sound was the faint buzz of the party's music, as if it were miles away. I whispered to myself, peering over the banister, and then I saw him again. He was standing directly beneath me now, looking up, that same chilling, unblinking gaze. The room felt suffocating. The walls seemed to close in. I need to leave, I thought, backing away from the railing. But I didn't move, I couldn't. The air around me thickened, and the world seemed to tilt. The stranger's eyes bored into me, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Then a voice echoed from downstairs. "It's fine, he won't be here long." The figure blinked and took one last look at me. Slowly, he turned and walked into the hallway, his presence fading into the shadows. I didn't leave the house that night. I didn't tell anyone, but I'll never forget the way he watched me. I'll never forget the way my breath felt trapped in my chest as the walls closed in around me. Even now, weeks later, I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching me from somewhere in the dark. It was supposed to be a fun night, a harmless costume party, a chance to let loose for once. But I should have known something was wrong the moment I slipped into that costume. The fabric felt too real, too warm against my skin, like it was absorbing every bit of my body, every breath I took, and yet I couldn't take it off. Not for hours, not even when I tried. The party was held in an old mansion at the edge of town, one of those places that's been around long enough to develop its own eerie reputation. The kind of place you tell ghost stories about, but no one ever really dares to go near. I'd driven past it countless times, its broken windows staring out like hollow eyes. When I first arrived, the mansion looked like a Halloween dream. Orange lights flickered on the front porch, a fog machine puffing out clouds that made it look like the house was sinking into the ground. People were laughing, their voices mixing with the eerie music coming from inside. This was my chance to shed the weight of everyday life and become someone else. The costume I wore was simple, a black robe, a hood that concealed most of my face, and a mask that looked like the face of a maniac. It was creepy, sure, but it didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary. Just a generic Halloween costume, right? But the moment I put it on, I felt different. My body felt heavier, and the mask, I could have sworn it moved when I wasn't looking. Inside the house, the noise was overwhelming. People danced, drank, and shouted over the music. The floorboards creaked under the weight of hundreds of feet. It smelled like old wood and stale beer, but there was something in the air, a presence, maybe something I couldn't place. At first, I shrugged it off, blaming it on the claustrophobic heat and the crowded room. But then I saw her. In the corner of the room, sitting by herself, was a woman dressed in a white dress, her long hair cascading down her back. Her face was pale, her lips a stark contrast with the black mascara smeared beneath her eyes. She was staring directly at me, as though she knew something I didn't. It made my blood run cold. I tried to look away, but her gaze felt like it was pulling me in. I started to move toward her, but as I walked, I noticed something strange. The room, which had felt so alive just moments ago, suddenly grew silent, as though the music had stopped. My feet dragged heavily against the floor, as if something was holding me back. Every step felt like a battle, and I could barely lift my feet. But I couldn't stop. I had to reach her. When I finally made it to her, the woman stood up, her eyes widening with recognition. She didn't say a word, but she held out her hand. I reached for it before I could stop myself, and when I touched her skin, a wave of dizziness hit me, making the room spin. And then everything changed. Suddenly, I wasn't in the mansion anymore. I was somewhere else, somewhere dark, suffocating, and filled with an oppressive silence. The air was thick, as if it had been trapped in this place for years. I felt out of place, like I didn't belong in my own body. It was as though I was someone else entirely. I glanced down at my hands, no longer the trembling, shaky hands I knew. These were strong, calloused, like the hands of someone who had worked hard, done terrible things. I raised my head and saw that I was no longer in the costume I had put on, but in someone else's life. I wore a uniform, one I didn't recognize, and I was standing in a dimly lit room, surrounded by old furniture that had been left to rot. The woman, now closer, smiled, her lips curling in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're finally here," she said, in a voice that wasn't hers, as if it had been borrowed. "I've been waiting for you." The air was colder now, and I could see my breath mist in front of me. Something wasn't right. I tried to pull off the costume, to rip it from my body and return to the party, but the fabric seemed to have fused with my skin. No matter how hard I tugged, it wouldn't come off. It felt like I was stuck in someone else's life, someone who was lost, broken, desperate. "It's time," she said. "You've taken my place." Panic flooded through me. My own life, the one I knew, the one I thought I could return to, was slipping away from me. I wasn't just wearing a costume anymore. I had become part of it. My thoughts felt like they weren't my own, the memories I had of my family and friends fading into a fog. With each breath, I felt more and more distant from myself. I looked around desperately, searching for any way out. The woman, now a shadow in the corner, watched me with a quiet sense of satisfaction. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, I was back in the mansion. The sounds of laughter and music returned to my ears, and I was standing in the same crowded room where I had started. But everything had changed. I was no longer part of the crowd, no longer one of them. And the mask, it was gone. But the feeling, that oppressive, suffocating feeling, lingered. The sensation that something or someone was still watching me. I stumbled back, my breath quick and shallow, unsure whether the nightmare had ended or if it had only just begun. The door to the mansion creaked open. As I turned, I caught a glimpse of the woman's face, just for a moment, as she disappeared into the shadows. And I knew then that I had never really left. Halloween was supposed to be just like any other. The usual mix of spooky decorations, candy-filled trick-or-treaters, and a sense of thrill in the air. But as the evening wore on, something about this Halloween felt different. It started with a noise. I was sitting in my apartment alone, the flickering orange glow of my pumpkin lantern casting long shadows on the walls. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending dry leaves skittering across the ground. My phone buzzed with a few text messages from friends, but the house felt still, too still. I rubbed my arms, trying to shake the unease crawling up my spine. I went to make myself a cup of tea to calm my nerves. The faint smell of cinnamon from the candle I had lit offering a bit of comfort. But just as I reached for the kettle, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I hesitated. "Who would be calling at this hour?" "Hello," I said, my voice trembling slightly, already feeling a chill creep down my neck. There was a long pause. A breath, slow, deliberate, echoed through the receiver. Then came the voice. "Is this your name?" I froze. My heart skipped a beat. How did they know my name? No one ever called me on Halloween, especially not from an unknown number. "Who is this?" I managed to whisper, my throat dry. The line went silent again, longer this time. My hand trembled as I pulled the phone away from my ear, glancing at the screen. The call was still active. The seconds ticked by with agonizing slowness. And then, just as I was about to hang up, the voice returned. This time it was lower, almost a whisper. "You know who I am. You've been ignoring me for years." I didn't recognize the voice. It wasn't anyone I knew, but the words, they seemed too familiar. Something about them twisted inside me, dredging up forgotten memories. My pulse quickened. "Who are you?" I choked out, my voice quivering. Another long pause, and then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. "I'm the one who's always there, watching, waiting." The call ended abruptly, leaving a ringing silence that seemed to stretch on forever. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. The air in the room felt heavier now, suffocating. I felt watched. It wasn't just the phone call. It was the way the shadows in the room seemed to shift unnaturally, the way the flickering light from the lantern danced on the walls like something alive. I walked over to the window, pulling the curtain aside. The street below was empty, silent. No trick or treaters, no cars passing, just the eerie rustling of leaves in the wind. I tried to shake off the sensation creeping up my spine. It was just a prank, I told myself, a sick Halloween joke, but the words waiting and watching gnawed at me, refusing to let go. Minutes passed, an hour, maybe more. My skin still crawled, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I got comfortable on the couch, distracted by the glow of the television. Then the phone rang again. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to know what would come next. But something pulled at me, and against my better judgment, I pressed accept. I said, my voice barely above a whisper. This time, there was no pause, no eerie silence. The voice spoke immediately, clear as day. Do you remember the sound of the knocking? The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I did remember. It was a night years ago, Halloween, just like this. I had been a child, sitting in my room with the lights off, thinking it was just the wind tapping at the window. But no, it was knocking. Soft, insistent. Someone or something on the other side. I'd told myself it was nothing, but now, hearing the voice on the other end of the line, I realized it was never nothing. It had been them. I felt sick, my breath shallow as I tried to steady myself. Who are you? I managed to whisper, my chest tight. The voice didn't answer. Instead, I heard the sound of faint, soft tapping, like a finger drumming against wood. It was coming from somewhere deep inside my apartment, just beyond the door to my bedroom. The tapping grew louder, rhythmic, like a countdown. My hands shook violently as I dropped the phone, the line still open, the voice still present. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, fighting to comprehend what was happening. The knocking, it wasn't in my head, it was real. I stood up, my legs trembling as I made my way toward the source of the noise. The tapping continued, and each step I took felt like 100 miles. As I reached the door, it stopped. Silence. I threw the door open. My breath caught in my throat, nothing. There was nothing there, just emptiness. But on the floor, scrawled across the carpet in something dark, something unmistakable, was one word, soon. I backed away, the room spinning as I tried to steady myself. The phone, still on the floor beside me, buzzed again. But this time, I couldn't bring myself to pick it up. The walls felt like they were closing in. I stumbled out of the room and bolted the door behind me, my hands still shaking. Whatever this was, it was far from over. I wasn't sure if I had escaped or if the nightmare was just beginning. But as the wind howled outside and I locked every door and window, one question kept echoing in my mind. Who or what was waiting for me? And why, on this Halloween night, had it finally decided to call? It was Halloween night, and I should have been home, wrapped in the comfort of my couch, watching a movie, the kind of quiet, ordinary evening that always gave me a sense of peace. Instead, I found myself walking down an unfamiliar street in a neighborhood I had never visited before. The air was cold, but not unbearably so, just enough to make me pull my coat tighter as I turned the corner, my sneakers crunching softly on the fallen leaves. The street looked normal, too normal. Rows of houses lined either side, decorated with the usual Halloween garb, orange lights, cobwebs draped over railings, pumpkins carved into grinning faces. But something felt off, a creeping sensation that gnawed at the back of my mind, as if the street itself was holding its breath. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. It wasn't the kind of loneliness you can explain away. No, this felt like someone or something was walking behind me, just out of view. I'd heard the faintest of footsteps, soft enough to be drowned out by the rustling of the trees, but the sound was unmistakable, the steady, rhythmic tapping of shoes against concrete. I paused and glanced over my shoulder. No one. The street was empty, the houses silent. I shrugged it off as my imagination, the kind of irrational fear that tends to pop up when you are walking alone at night. Halloween, after all, was all about ghosts and ghouls, wasn't it? But then the footsteps came again, closer this time. Too close. My heart skipped a beat. I didn't dare turn around this time. I didn't want to. The fear, sharp and sudden, coiled tight in my chest. It was as if my body knew something my mind was refusing to accept. I quickened my pace, my footsteps echoing against the pavement, only to hear the unmistakable sound of someone matching me step for step. The rhythm was perfect, like an eerie reflection of my own movement. It couldn't be real. It had to be a trick, right? But the feeling persisted. A cold chill settled over me, crawling up my spine. I glanced down the street, hoping to see something, a car, a person, a flicker of light from a house, but all I saw was darkness, no one in sight. The feeling that I was being watched intensified. I turned another corner, nearly running now, desperate to reach a more populated area. The footsteps followed, matching my every move. At this point, I wasn't even sure if they were real. Maybe it was all in my head, the lingering effects of too much Halloween horror, or perhaps the city itself was playing some sick joke. But the footsteps kept coming. I looked over my shoulder again, and this time, I thought I saw something. A shadow, just a flicker in the corner of my eye, but it was enough to send a jolt of terror through me. I stumbled forward, my breath quickening, chest tight with panic. I turned down an alley hoping for some escape, but the footsteps didn't hesitate. They were still behind me, the sound of them growing louder, closer. I reached a dead end, a high stone wall too tall to climb. There was no way out. I spun around to face whatever was following me, my heart pounding in my ears. The alley was empty, just the dim glow of streetlights casting long shadows over the brick walls. I was alone, but the footsteps, they didn't stop. I froze, my pulse thudding in my throat. The footsteps had stopped too. The silence was thick, oppressive. I stood there for what felt like hours, my breath shaky, hands clammy, waiting for something, anything to happen. And then, from the darkness ahead of me, I heard it, a voice, soft, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. "You shouldn't have come." I whirled around, but there was no one. Just the empty alley, the streetlights flickering as if mocking my fear. My knees went weak, and I backed up against the stone wall, fighting to steady my breath. Who was that? Was it one of the kids playing some Halloween prank? This didn't feel like a joke. This was something else. The footsteps began again, slow at first, like a deliberate pacing, each step calculated to keep me just on the edge of sanity. I turned toward the wall, my back pressed against it, trying to breathe through the panic, trying to tell myself it wasn't real, that this would all end once I turned the corner. But I didn't move, I couldn't. I stayed there watching the dark, waiting for something to happen. The footsteps came closer right behind me now. I could hear the soft scrape of shoes against the pavement, the light breath of someone or something waiting just a few inches away. But when I turned, when I finally mustered the courage to face whatever was there, nothing. The street was empty, no shadow, no figure, just the sound of my own breath, ragged and uneven in the still night air. I don't know how long I stood there. It could have been minutes or hours, but eventually the sound of the footsteps stopped. I left that alley as quickly as I could, my heart hammering, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. When I finally reached home, I locked the door and didn't look back. But even now, as I lie in bed, I can still hear the faintest of footsteps, echoing softly from somewhere far in the distance. I know I'll never forget Halloween night, the night I wasn't alone, even when I thought I was, and part of me wonders, maybe I never will be. For as long as I can remember, there's been something unsettling about Halloween in my neighborhood. It's not the costumes or the fake cobwebs hanging from porches. Those things are expected. It's the empty house next door. The one on the corner with the sagging roof and the overgrown ivy creeping up the sides. The house that always seemed out of place, even in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other's business. Every year as Halloween approached, it was the same. I'd noticed the decorations going up in the homes around me, the laughter of children trick-or-treating, the hum of excitement filling the air. But across the street, at the old house, there was nothing. No lights, no pumpkins, no ghosts, just an eerie silence. This year, it felt different. A chill in the air, maybe, but also something more. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me from that house. The shadows seemed deeper this year, the wind colder. The old house was never well kept, but this time, it seemed wrong. It was 6:30 p.m. on Halloween night when I first noticed it. I was on my porch, handing out candy to the few trick-or-treaters brave enough to wander down my street, when I saw the lights flicker on in the empty house. Not a subtle flicker, but a sudden blinding flash that seemed almost intentional. I froze for a moment, staring at the windows that hadn't been touched in years. Then, just as quickly as they had lit up, they went dark again. My heart thudded in my chest. It was strange. No one had lived there for ages. The house had been abandoned since I moved in, its owner, Mr. Albrecht, disappearing without a word. No relatives, no reason, just a void of silence. A hole in the fabric of the neighborhood. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just a glitch, maybe the wind rattling the old wiring. But deep down, I knew something was off. When I went inside to grab more candy, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder at the house. I saw a figure standing in the upstairs window, a silhouette. It was only for a second, but the hairs on my neck stood up. The figure didn't move, it just watched. I didn't recognize it, but I knew it wasn't just the wind. I told myself I was being foolish. But the feeling of dread lingered. Something was wrong. My phone buzzed in my pocket, snapping me from my thoughts. It was a text from my friend, Laura. "Are you doing okay?" I wasn't sure how to answer. How could I explain to her that something was wrong without sounding crazy? As the night wore on, I kept seeing the figure. It would appear in the window and then vanish. I thought I was losing my mind. By 9 p.m., I was the only house left with the lights on. The street had grown quiet and the air felt heavy. I was about to close the door when I heard it scratching, slow and deliberate, coming from the other side of my door. Not from the street, but from the old house next door. I grabbed my phone, my hand shaking. I wanted to call the police, but a part of me knew that would be pointless. A house that had been abandoned for years, a strange feeling that couldn't be proven. The scratching continued, growing louder, closer. My heart was in my throat. I opened the door slowly, peeking around the frame. There was nothing at first, only the darkened street. But then, there it was, a shadow, at the edge of the porch of the old house, just barely visible in the dim light. It was a person. No, not a person, a figure. The figure stood still, watching me. And then, as though it had been waiting for the right moment, it started to move toward me. My breath caught in my chest as I realized that it wasn't just any shadow. It was him, the man who had disappeared, Mr. Albrecht. But how could that be? I'd heard the rumors, of course. People said he'd gone mad, maybe died somewhere out of sight. But no one ever saw him after that night he left. The figure was no longer just an outline. As it got closer, I could make out the details. The ragged clothes, the dull, unblinking eyes. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and there was something about him that didn't seem quite human. I backed away from the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. The figure reached the base of my porch steps and stopped, just staring at me. It was as though he wanted something. Maybe it was a plea for help, or maybe he wanted me to join him. I didn't wait to find out. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart racing. I could hear the faint sound of scratching against the wood, as if the figure was still waiting. I didn't sleep that night. And every Halloween since then, I've kept my lights off, never daring to peek out. The house next door still stands, abandoned. But sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear scratching at my door. And when I listen carefully, I hear a voice soft and distant calling my name. I don't know what happened to Mr. Albrecht, but I don't need to. Whatever he became, I know it's out there, watching, waiting.